everybody. I am shooting a video in my kitchen because this is what I did this weekend. I refinished my countertop. Ooh, this used to be just white, like, you know, the original Mirror's Edge baked in light white. And now it's like got improved texture packs, enhanced graphics. I'm very proud of myself. Ooh. But I'm standing here in my kitchen keeping Binky off the countertop because he's been liking to jump up on it to freak me out. So I figured what better way to pass the time than to shoot today's video since I gotta do it anyway. And yes, I am wearing a super ugly cat shirt. It's a Christmas cat shirt. That's this Elfie selfie. Somebody gave this to me. They're like, you like cats, right? And I'm like, I don't even do Christmas really fully, but thanks. So I use it as a painting shirt, and it's very important. I'm not gonna pan down for this because I'll lose my camera, but no pants while painting. This is very important because it doesn't make sense. Oh, the side of the bin is showing that I'm propping this up on. But it makes a lot more sense to me to just not wear pants than to take a perfectly good pair of pants and get paint on it. I have to wear a shirt because bras are expensive and I don't want to get paint on my bras. But yeah, no pants. And the no pants home improvement got a bit weird this time around because our neighbors were redoing their roof. So I was like, oh crap, they might see me with no pants in some of the upstairs windows that we normally don't bother with because there's nobody on the roof. But so I just taped something over the window instead of putting on pants because I don't like pants. No pants is better. It's freer. Yeah, it is, really. But that's not what I'm talking about today. But I'm dreading talking about what I'm going to talk about today, which is the Guild Wars 2 ArenaNet. Oh crap, 2 people got fired, plus Reddit, plus Games Press. Freaking drama. I'm going to try to go through this as fast as I possibly can in terms of summary because crap. I mean, if you don't follow this, well, you may be interested in it. So I'll try to do as brief a summary as possible to respect your time. What basically happened is at some point, a narrative designer who happens to be female, I shouldn't say happens to be female this time because it's actually directly relevant to the story. So a female narrative designer went on Twitter and posted her views on how MMO characters are inherently boring because you have to give people an infinite number of choices as to how they play their character, which makes creating like narratives and dialogue and all that stuff for them that are interesting impossible. And someone who I believe is a YouTuber, and I'm not using names because I don't want to get accused of encouraging harassment against individuals, so I'm just going to give people that little extra step. If they want to be a jerk, they're going to have to Google the names. But another person jumped in and basically said, they actually said, this is interesting, I'm going to disagree with you slightly. And for me, if I got a slight disagreement, I'd be like, woohoo! Beginning of a conversation. Whoa, that shirt is creepy. But I'd be like, whoa! Based on some of the extreme disagreements that people have with my content, based on stuff I don't think is very important, but I digress. And so basically his, I assume it's a he's, argument was that you have to do it through the narrative design and branching dialogue, and you can make it interesting. It's not inherent to MMOs. It's just sort of a general game design thing, which to me is sort of the beginning of an interesting back and forth, but this narrative designer disagreed. She, like, retweeted the tweet with the guy saying he disagreed slightly, saying, this is what it's like to be a woman in game development now. People who don't even work with you telling you how to do your job, and she was going to insta-block people who did this sort of thing. And it grew. This is one of these things that encounters like this happen all the time. Some of them blow up, some don't. But in this case, the Guild Wars 2 community got upset another developer jumped in, another writer who happened to be male, and it just escalated, and there was a big war of words. Reddit blew up, and the two ArenaNet employees involved got fired. And this is the big controversial point, as I understand it, because this subdivided the two factions of whether she was right and whether she was wrong, because now it's, well, I don't think she was right, but I don't think she should be fired, or she was wrong, she should be fired, and same on the other side. It's sort of a division of, well, I don't think she should have been fired, but the company has the right to fire her, versus, no, this is wrong. And I even saw on Facebook some people I know work in game development. Just, obviously this is a very personal thing for developers, because social media can be a lot. And I want to be absolutely clear, I'm coming at this from someone who knows what it's like. The nice thing about me running my own shop is that I don't have to worry about anyone but you guys agreeing or disagreeing with what I do. I don't have a boss to report to. And that's really nice, because when I did have to deal with higher-ups, the amount of, I'll say it, flat-out censorship, because they just didn't want problems, was crazy. And I was like, if I'm willing to take the hit, why does anyone else care? But reasons moving on. So here's what I think. And that's the beginning. I should add one more detail, that the games press jumped on it and included, and this came from Twitter as well. Like, unfortunately, a big part of this scandal is that the games press allowed Twitter and Reddit to do their thinking for them. Not necessarily because I think they're lazy, though there may be some of that. They might also be biased, like predisposed to believing this is another case of horrible online harassment. But also they like to get this stuff up fast, because the more clicks you can get on an article, the better. But the clicks are exponentially more valuable if you can do it fast. And that's the big problem with internet-based media, internet-based reporting, is that it's not just about how much traffic you get, but how much traffic over time. So how many articles can you generate in a given day? And that's really brought down the discourse, because people don't search this stuff out. Reddit is not a source, as far as I'm concerned. Reddit is a nice starting point, but in order to really use something in an article, unless it's like, this happened on Reddit today and that's it, you really need to be able to do follow-up with someone you're going to quote. And one of the things that drives me crazy about modern day reporting, another thing, is that they use tweets and they use Reddit posts as sources. And tweets, at least you can tell who said it most of the time. Like, there's still anonymous accounts on Twitter, but if it's a verified account, okay, that is a public statement. But on Reddit, with just screen names, you don't know who this person is. You have absolutely no way of following it up. You have no way of knowing the authenticity of the comment, whether it was sarcastic or not. And in this case, it turned out that this was actually a supporter of this female developer who was pissed at the brouhaha, this comment that the games press picked up on as online harassment, because it basically said, oh, we can get anyone fired we want as long as we scream loud enough. It turned out it was somebody who was angry about it and just writing the most, offensive, ridiculous thing they could think of. They woke up the next morning, thought better of it, and deleted it. So this, and the reason I'm so hesitant to talk about it is this whole story is based on a hill of sand to begin with. We don't know. The biggest known unknown, you guys know I love this phrase, that you have your known knowns and your known unknowns. And sometimes your known unknowns are as important as the known knowns. But the known unknown here is we don't know what the situation was with these employees behind the scenes at ArenaNet. They could have been on extremely thin ice to begin with, and this was just the straw that broke the camel's back. Ew, there's a gross thing on my ceiling I'm gonna have to fix. I just noticed that. Let's move away from that. That's yucky. There we go. Okay. So we don't know whether, God, okay, now there's a light in my head, but that's okay. We don't know how fraught the working relationship was before this. And that's really important because it's a big difference as to whether something is, you know, someone's sort of last straw versus this was a one-off thing. Now, people have informed me it wasn't a one-off thing. There were comments made after Total Biscuit died by this female narrative developer that were quite cruel, I'll say. You guys know I don't like that. But though the developer, when she went to the press, did say that she said she was going to be opinionated, know this now. That's really easy to say. But when you do have a brand to consider, you have to consider whether people are going to revolt against what you do. If you want absolute freedom to speak in public, go to indie, make your own stuff, take the pay cut that comes with that. There are trade-offs for working in AAA. And that's not my opinion. That's just the reality of the business. Most of the AAA game developers I know would like to say more publicly, but they can't because they're associated with a company and that matters. Now, do I think they should have been fired? Not over this, no, because everybody has bad days. And I am willing to give benefit of the doubt and say, even though some of her previous online activity has been suspect, this was probably just a bad day. It seemed like it was a straw that broke the camel's back kind of thing. I don't think the person who tweeted her with the slight disagreement meant anything more than to start a conversation on something of mutual interest. This is something I had to learn. I'm trying to figure out how to explain this phenomenon. That, unfortunately, there are people out there, and I say unfortunately because it actually is just a disconnect. Nobody means any harm. When you create stuff for a living, obviously, the person who handles criticism bestest of anybody in the world still likes to hear good stuff about their content. And when the bad stuff sort of feels like it's overwhelming the good stuff, you get snippy and short. Sometimes you do just want to be able to talk without somebody criticizing you. I've learned Twitter is not the place for that. YouTube is not the place for that. So you have to find your outlets and channel that in an appropriate way. Now, the thing is, you know, sometimes you want people to read something because, you know, you find it interesting. I don't know what the intent was here. If you don't want blowback from something, you don't put it in a tweet. I mean, I've said this quite a few times. I don't put anything I'm really upset about on Twitter. It's always astounding to me how many people think I'm like angry or freaking out on Twitter, because usually I'm just joking, because first of all, they're not topics that I think warrant getting really upset about, but also I've learned, don't put things you feel vulnerable about on Twitter. And you'd think by this point we'd know this about Twitter, but people do have bad days. I mean, I've put stuff on Twitter that I later thought, yeah, don't talk about that on Twitter again. And this was going to be one of those topics that I wasn't going to talk about, because I've seen people on Facebook that I respect, and I've seen people on Twitter, and they're on opposite sides of this thing. And so I'm going to piss off someone because I'm in that position. If I were her boss, it's real easy for me to say I wouldn't have fired her, but maybe the guy was just so sick of this that it's like, that's it. You know, it was the straw that broke the camel's back with her. It was a straw that broke the camel's back with him. Developers, you know, she said when she went to the games press that developers are expected to meaningfully engage with the fan base. That may be true for that company, but I know plenty of companies who give employees the option to not do that. It's basically, if you're going to engage positively. But if you don't want to engage, if you just don't want to be on Twitter, if you don't want to be on Facebook, that's your right. I'd find it a little suspect that a game company would be expecting their narrative designers and their writers to be their PR wing, because PR is their PR wing, and PR likes to very tightly control things. A lot of PR departments would prefer that developers don't tweet, because then they can control the message and they can control the rollout, and they don't have, you know, too many cooks spoiling the broth as far as they're concerned. I would like to see it more open. I would like to see more developers talk directly to the fan base. And quite frankly, if somebody is a cantankerous jerk, I have a very high bar with whether or not that's going to prevent me from buying their game. There are some where I find it does kind of take away that there's such a dick that I can't enjoy their game. Sorry, that was a gendered comment, but they're such a jerk that I can't enjoy their game. But usually it's just like, well, I don't necessarily like the public comments of this particular developer, but I really like their game. So what am I going to do? I'm not going to read their public comments, and I'm going to keep playing their game because I don't have a moral objection to this person. They're just kind of annoying, which is that should not affect their business. Creative people are sensitive. This is something we really need to understand better in gaming. We see gaming as something for computers, right? People sitting there coding. I don't know why it's on my chin. Down here more. They say, we code, you know, and unfortunately, people treat coders like machines in human forms. They treat coders like robots, all brain, no feelings, which isn't true, and that's not fair. But then you have the writers and the artists and, you know, the designers and all that stuff. And they're creative people. They're artistic people. A lot of them went to art school. You know, they came out of art school with an art portfolio. These are sensitive people. And this is something that we do have to keep in mind. Now, in this case, that doesn't apply because I don't even think the original tweet was, the response tweet was even a criticism. It was just talking about something that we're interested in. And this is the problem with engaging on Twitter. We really do need vehicles where various parts of the gaming community can talk about this stuff, because Twitter, everyone is so on guard that things can be taken the wrong way. But that doesn't explain the tirade against the fan base that ensued. That's when my benefit of doubt ends. And personally, I would have sat them down and just says, you can't do this again. I'm not there. It wasn't my call. I have been in circumstances where you go in expecting it to go one way and the person just responds so badly that you're like, that's it. You're not listening. You know, we need a hierarchy of some kind in this company. And if you're not going to respect my authority, this can't work. Like there are times where your boss is just your boss and you don't have to like it, but you have to heed it. And maybe that didn't happen here. I have no idea. We don't have enough publicly available information to say for sure. But once again, this was something that, and there are ways of preventing this. Like if the game studios and the games press and everything just had a no drama policy, like if people are going to fight it out, let them fight, these things wouldn't get so big. I don't think that a small amount of conflict is a bad thing. I think that we need to start seeing creators more as people who have bad days, who are frustrated by things, who are feeling low, just based on, you know, the spike in depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, all that stuff. I do think you guys know that we generally need to be kinder to each other. But that goes both ways. Like, it is a valid choice. I do it all the time when someone makes a comment that hits me the wrong way, I can choose to just not respond. I'll snark if I'm actually not emotionally invested. This will be an amusing conversation. And people are like, oh, you're so mad. It's like, no, I'm not mad. I'm just having to go with the guy because, you know, I choose to have fun. I will either have fun with you, or I have fun at your expense, or I will walk away. And walking away is a viable option. I am hesitant personally. I would rather respond and get in someone's face than ignore someone, because I think that's more respectful. But sometimes you just gotta, right? If it's a screen name I have never seen before and they make some shitty comment, I usually just scroll by. If it's somebody I've talked to quite a bit and I'm like, what? What the heck? I think they can handle it. I will engage, even if it's kind of a spat. I think we're way too damn conflict averse as an industry. However, it is a do not pass go to go after the gaming community in general. It's what I keep saying over and over and over again. It's bad form for a politician to insult voters, a person writing for a car magazine or a film magazine, insult drivers or film goers at your own peril. You're spitting on the people who are paying for your work. There are ways of disagreeing. There are ways of venting your frustration that don't go there. And that's where I think things faltered. And this is where I think I can understand where the boss at ArenaNet went. Like I said, I probably would have given them a warning, but I say again, anybody who's making any sort of money in this industry is very lucky. It's very competitive, but we get to work on and interact with some truly amazing product. I believe it's the most exciting, dynamic, creative medium for expression in the world. We are so fortunate to be able to have anybody give a damn what we have to say about these things. And this has to inform how we talk about it publicly. You know, if you're just having a bad day and you want to complain, do it privately. And we do have to be aware that anything you put on something like Twitter, on any social media, on Reddit, whatever, is for public consumption. And the whole point of those mediums is for people to have the opportunity to respond. Now, there are certain things where I don't care what people say. I don't respond at all. I just gotta say it. Let the chips fall where they may. Fine. But we have to be conscious. Now, there was a caveat to that the narrative designer said that when they were doing social media orientation, she was pulled out of social media orientation to work on some upcoming expansion. Now, that is a point in her column of if you make the choice to pull her out of employee orientation, you have to give her the opportunity to make mistakes, because she was not present for the situation where you set expectations, and that's absolutely valid. And so there's little things where I think that there are some management issues at these companies, at game studios. There usually are. They're not so organized chaos. But that is fair, and that's why I think that I probably wouldn't have fired her, because it'd be like, well, yeah, okay, fair. It's reasonable to assume you didn't know. Sometimes the loss to business is so profound that that doesn't matter anymore. But like I said, there's too much unknown here. I don't think there was enough time to see whether sales were actually lost. The fan base was just riled up. And there needs to be more of a respectful back and forth between developers and their fans. Unfortunately, and this has come from years of, you know, it's true, companies companies perpetuating this paradigm where the people who scream the loudest get their way. And people tend to go back to retake Mass Effect for that. It actually started sooner. It started with the moral panics behind Mortal Kombat and Doom and stuff like that. The developers couldn't argue that, no, there's no evidence. Then there was no evidence that video games actually made you violent. Now we know they don't make you violent. There's actual active evidence over and over and over again. This is that games don't. But it didn't matter what they thought. Just to stay alive as a company, they needed to appease the screaming. And one of the saddest things ever was, I was told when I interviewed Ed Boon, don't ask him about the violence in games. Like, they will end the interview if I do that. And, you know, sexism in games and all that stuff. And it's like, I'm a fan. And that's one of those things where I was like, I understand where they're coming from, but you really shouldn't be telling me what not to ask. And, you know, I didn't, because I didn't want to get shut down. But that's bad form. Like, it's legitimate, and he shouldn't be shut up about it. But, you know, then I realized he can't win. And that's not fair for creators. I think the Mortal Kombat games are freaking brilliant. But, like, this is the paradox we're in. That all this social justice stuff, they stomp their feet and call things hateful and Nazi this and alt-right that, and they make a lot of noise, and that's seen as somehow fighting the good fight, being on the right side of history. But the tactics, the over-the-top screamy noise, wishing death on people, is no different than the people they complain about as entitled nerds. And I'm sitting here going, okay, the topics have changed, but the tactics are exactly the same. So if it's wrong for everybody. And I don't think it's morally wrong. I think it should be ineffective. I know it is with me. And if this is working on game companies, well, that's not good for your bottom line long term. I think Rockstar Games is an example. CD Projekt is another example of companies that wrote out backlashes to pretty massive profits. They were like, say what you want about our game. We're going to do what we're going to do. We have our creative vision and we're sticking to it. I think that should be the way forward. And I think that companies should be open to listening to a well-argued point, not the loudest screamed point. And I think in the case of Retake Mass Effect, it was actually a valid point, which is why I don't like it when I see people say, like, this is where everything went bad because a developer caved. And I think that in that case, BioWare was actually, yeah, okay, this isn't consistent with endings of previous games. It wasn't satisfying, so we're going to make it right. That is a valid choice. If your narrative is the central reason why people play your games, because, you know, I used to love BioWare games. The combat has never been the highlight. They're because they're classic RPGs. They're not action RPGs. Well, Mass Effect was supposed to be. I digress. Anyway, it's valid if you want to, like, could you imagine if Grand Theft Auto brought out a game with, like, 2 cars? No! And that's sort of the equivalent. A BioWare game with, like, this very linear, you have 3 options ending without the branches and finding out what happened to everybody. That's the equivalent of Grand Theft Auto putting out a game where you get to drive a Toyota Corolla or a Kia, and that's it. You know, like, no slight on those cars, just, it's not enough choice. It's not what people come to expect from those series. So I think the whole Retake Mass Effect movement actually gets a lot of unfair criticism. They actually had a valid point. The shrinking of depictions of women in video games to boyish-bodied, brown-haired white girls with a tan who are maybe vaguely ethnic, that was a response to shrieking. And that actually did limit creativity, and it's not good. But again, that comes all the way back to the Doom and Mortal Kombat moral panics that just game companies roll over because they don't want to get regulated and they don't want to be put out of business. So we as an industry have to be better than that. And that's going to have to come from the developers first, not the fan base. The developers decide what treatment they are going to accept. And if you're going to let people scream and yell at you and call you names because you're afraid they won't buy your game, that is your choice. But you are then responsible for what happens to your community because of that choice. And nobody can make that choice for a game company but that game company. And while we all have to take a certain amount of crap, you guys know I set ground rules. I say I will not respond to this. I will respond to this. I prefer this. This is a do not pass go. And it works pretty well. Like, you guys respect those guidelines. They're not rules, they're guidelines. Because sometimes somebody will get really mad and I'll talk to them anyway. But we've established a certain respect, understanding that you're coming here because you like my content. Most of you, I know the ones who hate watch. I don't give them a lot of time. But I come from the position of you're here because you like what I do. And therefore I'm going to treat you accordingly. And I don't think it's unfair, wow, double negative, I think it's fair for a fan base of a game like Guild Wars 2 to expect the same treatment. That they're coming here because they love the game, and the assumption in interactions like that are they love the game. We also have to accept that some people are just going to be socially awkward about things. You know, fixate on tiny points. You gotta watch being ableist on that stuff because a lot of people who game have autism. And so in that case, they can't help it. And that's something I don't think gets talked about enough in gaming, but that's a topic for another time. I know that was really convoluted, and I know that didn't really come to any firm conclusions, and that's my whole point. Pretty much every opinion on this right now, well, that's not true. There's 4 or 5 general opinions on this that are absolutely valid. We can't even narrow it down to 1 or 2 because there's so little that's known. And so I just wanted to give you guys a bit of background so you can perhaps go, oh, okay, that part I didn't consider. Okay, that's fair. And make this sort of, what do we do so this crap keeps happening? Because I really get the sense from people I talk to about this, myself included, that we're tired of these drama bombs and we want them to be handled better. We don't want Reddit to be the arbiter of the internet. It's where people go to have opinions. Don't make it more than that. And nobody is forcing a company to make Reddit more than it is. So that's my take. I'd like to hear yours. Like, please share your perspectives. I'm curious at other people's perspective. Respectfully, obviously, no personal attacks. But I've talked to some people about this who had different opinions. And I know this is ironic based on this whole thing started, but I actually found them very informative. You know, I hate this. We didn't agree on everything. It's boring if you do. But they had a perspective on it that, you know, they're coming from a different place. So I can see my response is valid from where I'm coming from, but they're coming at it from the perspective of just somebody who's a straight-up game consumer. And that's valid too. It's important to listen. You can listen and you can validate. You don't have to 100% agree. That's boring. But if you're interested, if that's confusing, I'll do more about agreement versus validation. But I'm going to stop there because that's my opinion. And I've got to get back to work, getting my kitchen back in order. Because I have not had my coffee maker functional in 3 days. Holy crap.